All right, so we're recording. Welcome to the weekly ecosystem meeting, everybody. So I have the first item on the agenda, and that is just to check out the newly formed, newly created ecosystem subgroup. We have a team tasks project there. And so I've gone ahead and opened some issues for discussions around team process stuff as we ramp up. So I think there's an issue for discussing issue weights, and as well as one for how we want to do stand-ups, and another one for how we want to schedule meetings. So I envision these as being there for ongoing discussion as our next couple of team members come on board and we start learning their work habits, and we can get them involved in that discussion as well. So nothing that needs to be decided right away or implemented, but just there for an ongoing discussion.
Cool. What other sorts of things can go in here? Is this like, what are some other examples of stuff that we should be using this board for, or this group for?
Sure. Yeah, I'll add a couple things that I've seen other teams do, and then if anyone else has something to add, that'd be great too, because I'm also open to trying to learn what sorts of things are appropriate for this board. But for example, one thing is I just opened up an issue to propose bringing in a plan team consultant to have a little closer working relationship. I think that whole thing that we had talked about, Patrick, with like where we should store our various lab credentials, that could be opened as discussion. So okay. I think anything where we might maybe have a question or we might back and talking about it to somebody first. I think that could be the sort of thing where we consider, hey, should we in a team or the whole MR first thing, like should the MR, I think before we go to one of these team issues, we should also could go MR first and then have the discussion around it in that MR. But for things that aren't MR first, I think.
Okay. Actually, I've got a good one. I'm going to go ahead and I had a note to get retro and planning calls, scheduling calls set up. I'll just make an issue for that.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's perfect for this.
Awesome. Cool.
Awesome.
Hey, Nick.
I think, Nick, you are breaking.
Yeah, I'm not able to hear your audio.
Oh, weird.
It's kind of like cutting in and out.
Okay, is this better?
So far, so good.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason my headphones disconnected and then reconnected.
Okay.
Looks like Arturo has the next item.
Yeah. So basically, for me, I think that the previous team or previous people that were involved working with JIRA, we haven't done like a kind of knowledge transfer to this team. So there are a lot of things that we are figuring it out along the way, which is fine. But for example, today I just realized that we are using our JIRA instance, and also we have in the JIRA channel we have another instance, and so basically we have two JIRA instances now that we can use. Or I'm not sure what is the status of the previous one, but maybe we could have a better coordination, in the future, and maybe we don't need one of them, so we can shut down one of them. But I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually was unaware of the other instance. I had been told by one of our solution architects that had gotten closed, and so I didn't even think to go look because his understanding was that there was no JIRA lab available. So that's cool. I'm not too worried about it in the big scheme of things. I mean, it's running on a small GK instance or GCP instance, and the license cost a whole $10 for a year. So I'm not like too worried about it. But yeah, I think that that's totally fair. We should all swarm on kind of one lab just so there's less to maintain. We definitely don't need to have two up and having to be maintained over time.
But this is just one example, you know, but other things are like I was discussing with Nick about, for example, what is the point of contact in the case that I need help with something specific, or you know, specific questions about JIRA or maybe other things. And yeah, maybe Nick suggested that maybe we could have like a kind of consultant for this team. So in case that we have any doubt, we can go directly to this person or to the JIRA channel maybe and ask questions about that.
Yeah, and just an update there, that, yeah, an issue is created, and Shawn McGivern has weighed in on that, and I think there's some interest there from at least one person on the plan team. So hopefully we'll have that closer connection and relationship there. The idea is that it will be a temporary sort of arrangement through the end of the year, maybe asking like a 2 to 3 hour per week commitment from them, to someone to join these meetings, as well as be that point of contact that you're describing, Arturo, as well as yeah, just being available if someone needs, if a new engineer wants to get on like a synchronous call to work something out that they're going through, or if we have questions about just any general GitLab code-based questions, not just JIRA.
Yeah, I can see in the conversation that, for example, I know who are now the backend engineers with more knowledge about that. So, which is good. Cool.
Cool. Yeah, and I think you have the next item after that, Arturo.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the very beginning of the team, but I can see a kind of disconnection between the strategy for the team and the development, or the product and the development. So I like to reduce that gap and to have you know, a more high level overview about what's going on, what is the next steps and things that, because we didn't have a kickoff for the team, and maybe at this point it's very early because I mean, in 1 week another person is joining the team, maybe 1 month later, but and I think that the things are going to be, we are going to close this gap, but basically for me was a kind of, okay, just start to work on this. I start to get familiar with the code, which is good, but it's very difficult, for example, for me also to give feedback about what is the next priority, or what is important, or things like that, or what I'm going to do during the next month. I don't know too much, you know, or well, so basically we can improve on that, basically.
Definitely. So let me go ahead and add some stuff in doc. Here's this is in progress. So, but please take a look at it and see what you think. There's one that I'm working on. Here's another one that's being worked on. So right now this stuff is kind of being formed, and it's still in the early stages. But I'm trying to currently define what our 1 and 3 year strategies are going to be. But yeah, so I will like to kind of back up away from that though. My goal over the last couple of months was to try to put together a backlog of issues that were all around JIRA, because that's the thing that has been the highest requested area to have us focus on. So I collected a bunch of JIRA bugs and issues that needed to be addressed, some of which you've seen like aren't even still relevant, right? Like they've gone, there's been such poor backlog hygiene over time, and they have gotten so little attention that some of them, they're not even reproducible anymore, because they've, whatever the opposite of a regression is, right? It's like an accidental improvement has happened over time. So that's been good. I wanted to collect though a good set of issues, because I actually set up that board before we even had made you an offer, Arturo. So I had started to put that together, and I didn't know how many engineers I was going to have. I didn't know how many when they were going to start. So I tried to put together a board that would assume 3 to 4 engineers starting sometime in September, and then having plenty of work for them that was low priority, low impact, and that was also kind of focused in the same area of the code base, so that I could give you a couple of months worth of releases to really wander around and kind of get comfortable with the code base and get to know people inside the organization. And Arturo, I want to say specifically, you have more than exceeded my expectations. I'm super impressed with the work you've been doing. I was unprepared for you to be so productive. And I was also prepared for like there to be more people. So I'm really glad that I was able to queue up enough work that you were able to dive into. So that's awesome. So that's kind of where we're at today. And my expectation for the next couple of releases is going to be, well, we've got to get scheduling lined up for what's coming up. But I still want to continue to give you the space to kind of explore and get to know the code base, and with a focus area around tightening our JIRA integration. And so I think, so like that being said, let's kind of step into what the strategy for the next year is going to be. So I think that for the next probably 3 or 4 releases, we're going to be focused around JIRA integration. Specifically, the thing I want to attack is tightening up our configuration. It's really difficult to configure. It doesn't have enough options. There are 2 or 3 issues, and actually I've linked to them in the front end discussion that's coming up. There are some problems with like validating fields when you set up the configuration. There's also what I'd like to get to probably 3 releases from now. I think the kind of end game of the configuration stuff that we're talking about with JIRA is I would love for us to be able to get to group level integration, which has been a huge request. There have been a lot of customers who would like it. And I think it would have a massive impact for administrators of JIRA systems. And to give a really short version of why that's important, I just discussed with someone in Brooklyn last week who has 170 projects that are integrated across 3 different JIRA installations, right? And what they have to do, so occasionally they have moved these integrations around, moved the JIRA instances around, and they have to manually go into 170 projects and change those integrations one by one, right? And that's a huge pain. So if you could do group level integration, at least you could maybe reduce the number to, I had to do it 4 times instead of 170, right? And it'd be even better if you could do instance level integration, but that becomes a little more complicated, right? So if we could do group level integration using a group to tie to an entire JIRA instance, and then having that auto enabled for every project if you want, I think that would be incredible. And so that's kind of what we're looking at for the next few months. Is I want to focus on tightening down JIRA integration, making sure it's easier to configure, and then possibly looking at kind of our apex issue is group level integration. So moving from that, the next theme that I want to address, I'm kind of debating back and forth between ServiceNow and Jenkins. I think where I'm landing personally is I think ServiceNow is the next thing that needs to get integrated. There is some life support stuff with Jenkins, and we'll kind of talk about that next. But what I'd like to hit next is ServiceNow. So ServiceNow, if you're unfamiliar, is hugely used in the enterprise space. There are a lot of very, very large firms that use it. And it's kind of one of these table stakes things where if you're using ServiceNow, it's because you're a huge firm. Like no one with 50 employees is using ServiceNow, because that would be, that's using a howitzer to, to kill a snake. So the ServiceNow integration that's been requested, I have an MVC for, which I should probably link in here, which you may or may not have seen, but here we go. Let me just note ServiceNow. So I have an issue open for a ServiceNow MVC. I think that would be the next thing I'd like to hit. What this looks at a high level, so you don't have to go read through the whole thing today, what this looks like is when somebody uses ServiceNow, they typically use it for workflow management. So what that may mean is, a very simple version of it is, I need a new laptop. I submit the ticket into ServiceNow. The ServiceNow help desk employee sees it and says, yep, great, no problem, and then can track the workflow of, I bought the laptop, I handed it to them, I got it in our asset management system, it is now complete, and it's done, right? So that's a really basic version of what ServiceNow can do. People are starting to use ServiceNow for infrastructure management, for asset management as well. So one thing that you see commonly requested is, I would like to use it for either requesting infrastructure to be spun up or requesting a thing to be deployed to a piece of infrastructure. So in this case, one of the workflow I'm addressing here is, I have written code as an engineer. I would like to deploy the code to production. So I've passed through my CI pipeline. Everything has passed. Everything is green. Normally, what we'd see in a typical continuous deployment is that it would just get deployed to the next piece of infrastructure. What we'd like to see from these customers is, instead of deploying immediately, it goes out and creates a ServiceNow ticket. If ServiceNow, the ticket gets approved, then the pipeline can continue and it gets deployed to production, right? And that way they can have like an asynchronous discussion around, like, the infrastructure manager or the release manager or a compliance manager, whatever, can review it on their end. And then they can actually kind of thumbs up it from ServiceNow instead of having it automatically deployed through GitLab. So that's where I'd like to start with ServiceNow. I think beyond that, there are a couple of more workflows that we could address, and I've got those documented in the ServiceNow epic that is linked from the issue. So if you want to play with that, that's kind of the next big theme. I think I'd love to see us do a really agile approach where we go in, build the MVC with some help from, we should have a product designer. So have our product designer and Eileen work on what that experience should look like and figure out what's needed, go deploy that, and then talk to customers, get feedback, and then iterate on that for a few cycles. And I think we can get that up. What I'd really love to see out of that few months of that theme is, let's get us from having a planned feature all the way to a minimal feature. And then once we've hit minimal, we can kind of move on and then cycle back around on it later. So that's theme number 2 for 2020. And then finally, the last piece that we need to hit is going through our Jenkins integration. So the big highlight point with Jenkins right now is that there was previously a Jenkins plugin that allowed you to configure the integration between GitLab and Jenkins. That's still there. There is still some work being done on it. I saw CloudBees, who's one of our competitors, actually just added some code and did some work on that integration recently. So that's really cool to see that they're contributing to it. It's valuable to them, so that's exciting. But the reality is there's no maintainer for it going forward. So someone needs to take ownership of that, or at least figure out what that solution should look like. Because we have a lot of customers who are using Jenkins for their CI needs, and we need to make sure that they're able to use that, even though they want to use GitLab for everything else. So I think that's kind of finally wrapping up the 2020 year. That's the last big theme that I want to address over the next 12 months. And then in the meantime, there are a bunch of small things, right? So smaller level, like that's the high level strategy for the important items that we need to hit. The smaller things are, there are a bunch of small issues that I'd love to spike into. I have seen a number of things around broad service improvement, project service improvement, right? I think that some of the most exciting things to me would be abstracting out our chat integration, right? So like right now we have direct ties to Slack. I would love to see that abstracted out so that more chat providers can be used. There there's a lot of interest in using Mattermost and Matrix. And right now, those are going to have to be individual integrations. But if we abstracted out our Slack integration, we could make it pluggable so that any new chat system could pop up. And I mean, of course, Slack's going to be around forever, and everyone's going to use Slack forever, except that it's not, right? Like, there's always a new chat program every 5 or 6 years, right? We see this cycle through. Just like we could add, I don't know if HipChat is still gaining popularity or where that's at now, but like things like HipChat, right? Like you can plug in other things that are popular in other places. Microsoft Teams is up and coming. I don't know. I think they're even saying that Microsoft is claiming that their usage, like the team usage, is higher than Slack is today, right? So like Microsoft Teams integration, like other chat programs. Similarly, I think it'd be really exciting to work on abstracting out our security scanning stuff. There's some really interesting work that can be done there. I know the security team has been talking to a couple of different vendors, WhiteSource primarily. I know there's been some work on, WhiteSource is working on integrating their product with ours, but similarly, right? Like taking our security scanning stuff, abstracting it out, creating that, that interface so that you can add security scanning tools more easily and integrate those would be really exciting. So there are some other like pieces that we can kind of pepper in throughout the year so that we're not just working on these three things. There's definitely some variety to the stuff we can work on. So I know that was a lot. I just wanted to give like a really high level review of all the stuff that we're looking at. So I'll stop so that anyone else can ask questions or happy to click into any of that if you'd like.
I had just a question about some of the ideas around like abstracting. So like instead of thinking about it as like individual chat applications, it's like we can have something that's more portable. Like, would it from a user-facing perspective still look like individual integrations, but it's more just like the way that it's created is
I think
more interoperable?
That's a really good question. I think that to be able to really accurately answer that, we need to spike into some back-end stuff. But that being said, I think you're right. I think it does. I think it's a couple of things. One, we should have an internal API for integrating chat, and then abstract out like what the Slack project service is calling so that it's easy to duplicate that and add more of them. And then I think it probably from the UI standpoint and from the project service itself, it probably is going to be individual integrations. Because the reality is we can't assume that Slack and Mattermost have the exact same interaction paradigm, right? Like, this is making it up, this is not accurate. But like Mattermost doesn't have channels, right? Like they don't have channels. They only have users and then they have threads or whatever. And like threads don't work the same way that channels do. They're not persistent, like whatever. And that's not, okay, I shouldn't have used Mattermost because that's not accurate to Mattermost. But like say this exists as a new chat program. So what we have to do when we create the new integration for chat program X is we have to go, okay, well, like the direct messages thing works. So we can just plug that into our direct messages endpoint. So like that's one-to-one. But then we're going to plug into threads for this other thing. And then we're just going to have to not support the things that we're using in like channel notifications in Slack. Like we're just not going to use them because they don't make sense in this chat program. So I think that's why it's important to have that abstraction layer. Because you're going to have to modify what the integration looks like for every provider. And in theory, what this ends up looking like is you've got this abstraction layer, which means that you basically have a Slack driver and a Mattermost driver. And like each one of these things, just like a driver does in other pieces of software, like just connects where it's relevant in appropriate places.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
Okay, so we only have 4 minutes more, so let's.
Oh man.
So actually, next question was about front-end issues, just to to have in mind that, and for me probably to not take that kind of work, so we can go for the next one.
Yep, so I've got 3 issues on there, and then there's a 4th that Nick listed. We've got the 2 that I posted are JIRA config. Those are both validation that are on the JIRA config page. I don't know how that page is implemented. So it actually may be valuable if you could go in and just take a look at it and tell me if these are sufficient. My assumption would be that that validation should happen in JavaScript in situ in the page live. That may not be true. It may be validated on the back end on submit. I don't know. My assumption was that it's probably being validated on the page with JavaScript, in which case I think this would be a great fit for that person to do. Then the third one, if those don't work, I think I can flesh out further what that is, and I also need to do another cycle with UX to kind of tighten down what that is. But one of the first things I would love to introduce as kind of a new feature is I'd love to see us have Stack Overflow integration. I've been in talks with Stack Overflow for the last few months. They're really excited to see this. It's a really small feature add, but I think it would have a really huge impact on our user experience. So I think that's pretty exciting. And my assumption would be that it could be primarily implemented on the front end side. I think that could be a JavaScript only edition. So yeah, so those are the things that we've got queued up. Please take a look at the first two if you don't mind. I think that would be really valuable just to get you to peek at them and see if it makes sense for them to go tackle.
Yeah, there's also a security issue that I think is a good front end one. Got it in 12.5 right now, but that seems like one that our new front end engineer could also take a look at once they're up and running.
Okay, yeah. So definitely have a few things that we can queue up for them, and then hopefully by the time we've gotten around to 12.6 planning, 12.5 planning, we can get some more work on their plate. Cool. So Nick, do you want to talk through the MR by Eric real quick?
Yeah.
And actually, let me make a super quick note. Please send any leads for product designers. That's all. All right, Nick.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll also say if we need to, I set it at half an hour. I'm fine going over a couple of minutes, especially since we have a lot to discuss as it's our first meeting, but just put that out there. So yeah, just Shawn shared this with me, and I wanted to share it with the team. It's a new MR by our VP of engineering, just about it's the discussion around prioritizing availability and security over velocity. So it's an open MR, discussions happening there. I think it's a good one to follow as it sets the direction, potentially makes a change in direction of what folks on at a high level in engineering. Yeah, is there anything else to add to that, Shawn?
Just a quick context. This came from the discussion or retros of the many incidents happened in the last couple months because the GitLab.com was down multiple times and impacting the big customers. So that was we did retro, think about what we can do, and people pointed out that the current handbook says the velocity always other things, but now we need to make it available in the spirit of the velocity. Of course, both are important, but we can't leave the availability or scalability behind. Yeah,
that's cool. Awesome. Yeah, sorry, I'm reading through the MR. That's really exciting to see. I also like the addition on line 93, because I have been stumping for this so hard, every chance I have gotten, to change how we talk about velocity to feature velocity. I think that just the example I keep using, and actually I keep proposing that we should talk about it as value velocity, not even feature velocity. But I think the thing that is really important to me is shipping discrete value, things that we can say that actually matters. I think saying feature velocity instead of just velocity kind of gets us a little bit there. I'd love to see us keep going, but I think it's really important. Yeah, the downtime recently, we've had some major, not major, but major for us outages, and I would love to see us get a little more responsible at how we handle that. Shawn, do you have any insight? I know we were talking. I remember recently somebody was talking about adding more support for that, like adding more infrastructure support inside our engineering org. I don't have any insight on that though.
We are actually we are running the on-call process. That's the support we can offer to the infrastructure team, and also expanded to the self-managed. So that's the support team. So we are now covering the self-managed and GitLab.com with the on-call process. So that's what the development team is doing.
Cool, awesome. Well, that's awesome.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for providing that context. Let's see, and then you got your plugin for the product designer.
Yeah, that was it. I got
Cool.
my first resume across my desk, and it made me think yesterday, and it made me think, hey, I need to make sure everybody knows. If you know any great product designers who would be a good fit for this, please send them Jackie Bauer's way, and she can take a look at it. So
Awesome.
that's all.
Thanks. And then, yeah, I have this section for issues overview in the agenda. We don't need to go through it item by item, but since we have a workflow board that everyone can look at, but I will point out that since Arturo is making great progress on what we've scheduled for 12/4, I'll just say if there is bandwidth at the end, I think we've discussed taking on more JIRA issues. If there's room in the milestone. So there are a bunch of those in 12/5 for anyone who's
yeah, and I as a note, I added an issue in our team tasks forward. So Nick, you and I need to get together and set up a scheduling call and a retro call. It definitely looks like we're pretty overloaded for 12/5, so we need to sit down and figure out what we can get done and actually try to narrow down what that's going to be.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think what we did was just moved all the JIRA stuff we didn't want to do in 12/4 over to 12/5.
Yeah.
So
yeah. No, and that's totally super cool. Not a problem. That's totally fine. But yeah, I opened up the board and I was like, that's a lot. we need to shift some stuff around now. So that's cool. And I think especially as Arturo gets a little more comfortable and we can kind of narrow down what his velocity is going to look like, we can actually start to actually plan based on some sort of version of reality instead of just me putting my finger in the air and saying this many.
That is what it feels like right now. We'll get there. Awesome. All right. Does anyone have anything else they want to discuss?
Oh, Eileen, you had mentioned setting up an issue for ecosystem research.
Yeah, I was a little overly optimistic about my schedule yesterday, so
no, not a problem. Just want to know.
Yeah,
because you had said you were thinking about doing that. Are you still? Is that what the plan, or?
Yeah.
Is there another plan?
Yeah, I can just give a quick overview. Over the next week, I'm gonna just put together a research issue as a place for us to start kind of gathering any questions that are top of mind for us, and kind of use that as a starting point to see what are the things that we don't know, and like basically use that as a tool to help prioritize some of the research over the next few months. So I will probably, I'll keep an eye out for a research issue, and I can mention all the folks on the call just to like weigh in on anything that's on your mind as far as like what are some things that we want to learn.
Awesome. Fantastic. Yeah, and I wasn't trying to like, no pressure. I just wanted to know what your conclusion on that was, whether or not that was going to happen. That's totally fine. So that's great. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, let me know how I can dump lots of ideas and thoughts and questions in my head, and the right way to do it so that I'm not overloading you or whatever. So.
Yeah, no worries.
Cool. Well, awesome. Anything else? Are we good? I think we're good. Well, thank you everybody for your time. This has been great. And it's, and again, great work, Arturo. You're awesome.
Thank you very much.
All right, y'all have a great day.
Thanks,
Bye.
bye everyone.